Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SMM Connect webinar event, Increasing Win Rates and Profitability, 3 Keys to Greater Success with Michael Leinbach and David Yesford of Wilson Learning Worldwide. We're very happy to welcome back Michael and David for another great event here in SMM Connect. And I'm happy that you're here with us today. Thanks for joining us. That's me. I'm a producer for Training Magazine Network and SMM Connect. Please send me a private chat in the background by selecting the plus sign and then chat with host. If you have any kind of audio or technical issues that the help button doesn't help you resolve in the lower right, just let me know. And David, I'm sorry, would you mind muting? Again, I'm sorry, I'm picking up. Thank you. We're just picking up a little bit of background noise there, but I want to say welcome everybody again, and don't forget to register for these great events at SMM Connect. Go to smmconnect.com/calendar or simply click on the link right now on your screen and check our webinar calendar frequently, because a lot of times we have so much great content coming your way that we have multiple webinars, sometimes even in the same day. So make sure you check your webinar times. If you don't already follow us on X, formerly Twitter, you should do so at SMM Connect US. SMM Connect US, a lot of special announcements come through X. And if you don't follow us again, please do so today. Focused reports are available on SMM. Also, SMM Connect, go to salesandmarketing.com. And actually, if you do a search on focused reports, I don't believe the subscribe link is currently working, but if you do a search for focused reports, it'll call up the whole library of focused reports that are available to you in SMM Connect. So now let's get today's event started. And I also want to mention that at the end of today's webinar, I should say, we have a special article from Wilson Learning that is going to be distributed on increasing win rates and profitability. So do stick around, and let's get today's event started with Michael Leinbach and David Yesford. Welcome back to SMM Connect. David, welcome.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you to the SMM Connect and Gary Van Antwerp. Such a supportive and great partner overall. We've been doing this now, I think I'm counting 9 years, so that's pretty long time. Thank you also for the Adobe Connect platform. I know I don't need to thank the Adobe Connect platform, but I do every time, because this makes everything so easy for Michael and me to do our sessions, and really allows us to focus on the audience of listeners. So really useful. I want to call that out. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and welcome to Increasing Win Rates and Profitability, 3 Keys to Greater Success. One of the things that we know at Wilson Learning, and frankly, from my personal experience, and I'm sure yours, is that one of the critical ways to increase win rates is by having your salespeople pursue the right deals. As sales managers, you know that the salesperson who can identify those high probability and high profitability opportunities from their portfolio of accounts, they're just simply more successful. Dr. Leinbach and I have been collaborating on this topic of managing opportunities for a long time now, and we look to enable a dialogue with you over the next hour. If you've attended any of the Wilson Learning webinars in the past with SMM Connect, you know that Dr. Leinbach and I will have a robust discussion on the topic, and we invite you to come along. We encourage you to put your reactions, questions, and thoughts into chat, and we'll pause throughout to integrate those thoughts and questions as we go. Let me now pass over to Dr. Leinbach to get us going on the Wilson Learning webinar, Increasing Win Rates and Profitability, 3 Keys to Greater Success. Michael?
Great. Thank you, David. And thank you, Phil, for having us today. We really wanted to talk to you about really challenging to think differently about sales, and more specifically, the process you go through to make a decision whether to pursue an opportunity or not. What we're going to cover today is really going to look at the challenges business environment are experiencing regarding win rates and winning business. Um, we want to invite dialogue and inspection, not just in the session. Clearly, we want you to be involved and enter into chat when you have questions or comments. But also, it's about creating dialogue within a sales organization, between salespeople and their managers, or salespeople and their peers, in terms of making a decision about, do we pursue this business or not? But we're going to focus on 3 questions that really get to the best go, no-go decisions on opportunities. And hopefully, the outcome, you're going to have some clarity about the discipline required to do this right and make sure you're pursuing the right kinds of opportunities at the right time. With that in mind, I'd like to get an idea of where you guys are from. And so what I'd like to do is in the chat, just type yes if you have ever hear people in your organization, your salespeople, your managers, say things like, things are really confusing, not sure where we stand on deals now. Is that something you hear around your organization? Or we're spending a lot of time on deals we ultimately don't win? We spend just as much time on small deals as we do on bigger deals. Our margins are getting lower and lower, and we're not focusing on win rates right now. We're pursuing everything that comes through the door. You hear people in your organization say things like that? Yeah, we hear they could say
We're seeing
quite
that.
often.
We're seeing that, Michael. We're actually even seeing some exclamation points.
Yes. So, and that's really the focus on what we're going to be talking about today, is really helping you and your organization make decisions about what business to pursue and what business not to pursue. And it's really critical for organizations today because we're finding that win rates are starting to fall. In fact, the average win rates are about 44% today. That's down from 50% just 4 years ago, and it's still falling. It's going down. People are winning less and less business. One of the big culprits is no decision rates have grown within organizations. So companies basically making a decision not to buy has grown significantly. And account penetration, getting the bigger share of wallet, selling more products in organization is a big concern of sales executives within organizations. And one of the things that's remarkable is when you look at the data on how long it takes a rep to get up to productivity within an organization, it's around 50% are ready in about 9 months. It takes 12 months to get up to about 3/4 of the people being productive within the organization. The problem with that is the average tenure of new reps is about 18 months. So if they're not getting up to a level of productivity until 12 months, and they've only got 6 months left to go in their tenure, that's not a very cost-effective way to approach it.
So we need to start, after looking at the sort of the situation from a research kind of perspective, we now need to start with sales effectiveness, because that's ultimately what we're talking about with increased win rates, is about sales effectiveness. And organizations kind of differentiate themselves in different ways. And so one of the ways that organizations differentiate themselves initially is by product. They figure if they have a good product, all right, that will differentiate them in the marketplace. But what beats a good product? A better product. That's what R&D's job is. R&D's job is to always increase from a product standpoint. And so that's not the place for sustained advantage. It's really just a place that you can put in terms of having advantage, but you got to continue to renew that all the time. Other organizations then try and define or differentiate themselves by their brand. And you can look, frankly, you can look at every 6 months or so, and there's a list of top brands in the world. And you can look, and that's going to change every 6 months. Because what beats a good brand? Another brand that marketing's done a really good job at. That's marketing's job, is to really differentiate at the brand level. What we believe is that really the true place that you can have an organization can have sustained advantages at the salesperson level. And partly what we're talking about and sort of the setup for the conversation about increasing win rates and the productivity is really about a salesperson that is extremely effective, well developed, and able to now understand and appeal to the customer's needs, priorities, and interests better than the competition. So that essentially just sets up what we believe is that you can have sustained advantage at the salesperson level. It doesn't, and I'm not saying that you don't have to have a good brand. I'm not saying that if you have exceptional salespeople, you don't have to have good product. You got to have all that. But really where you can make the biggest difference and have that sustained advantage at the salesperson level. So again, talking specifically about with increased win rates, that's what we're talking about, is how do you use the good salesperson skills to better understand which opportunities to pursue and which opportunities not to pursue. Now, the other thing we've got to talk about, we've got to consider is this changing environment that's going on. I don't think I need to tell anybody that the environment's changing, but the implication of what's going on is that the customer buying process is changing. It was changing pre-pandemic. We all saw that, and that was more people involved was happening pre-pandemic. They People were using the buying process as a way to discover and sort of find a potential vendor to then follow through with. So they used it as data collection throughout the pandemic, and then now where disruption is the name of the game, that's even more acute. What everything we just that was just happening pre-pandemic. So those all there and everything's happening now. The other thing is because we've become accustomed to a hybrid environment, more people are involved in the buying process. They have from parts inside an organization and outside an organization, which means that as the environment that you're dealing with, the sales environment, you need to pay attention to managing both the internal, and what I mean by that is internal to your organization, but also internal to the client's organization. How do you manage those relationships? But oftentimes your solution is partnered with some other solution that an organization is implementing, and so there's external relationships outside of your organization or the client organization that you also need to manage. The sales processes become more complex. The selling of what your product and service has become more complex in general. And the other thing that's happening is that the quantity of calls is decreasing. Michael and I were doing a session here 6 months ago or so, and we were talking about the number of calls that were coming in and how we were talking specifically about how Michael deals with calls, and not only are the number of calls shrinking, but Michael was saying, I schedule 15-minute calls instead of what you might get if you were able to get on the phone previous to even to the pandemic, um, which means the quality needs to improve. If you've got less calls, your quality of what you do, how you add value at every step as a salesperson, and how as a sales manager you encourage that is critical. And at the end of the day, what the changing environment forces us as salespeople, forces us as sales managers to ensure that the salespeople are ensuring that everything that they pursue allows them to answer the question, are we good for them, the customer that we're trying to pursue or the client we're trying to pursue, and are they good for us? You've got to answer both of those questions as you go. So, in pursuing the right business and talking about pursuing the right business, we want to pass it over to you. We're going to do several interactions, as I mentioned at the opening. We'll want you to do chat. Thank you for doing that. But what we want you to do right now is to think about an important sales opportunity that you lost over the last 6 to 12 months. Actually, your salesperson lost, right? You could have been integral to it, or your salesperson. But think about that important sales opportunity that you or your salesperson lost. Okay, I'm going to give you a second to do that, not too long, and you can always change it. It doesn't really matter. I just want you to think about that whole kind of a loss kind of a standpoint. Thinking back across that whole sales process on the way to losing, what was the first sign that you saw that you were going to lose the sale? What was it? If you can, if you have something quickly, type it in chat for us. What was the indication? What did you see? Client ghosted you? Yeah, that's clearly that's clearly one. I hate when that happens too. Don't it? That's just terrible. It's like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, and they ghosted me. Oh my goodness gracious! That radio silence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
that's one. Yeah. Way the email. Oh, that's interesting,
yeah,
Jeanette. We'll talk a little bit more about the
yeah.
way that it was. And as we're thinking about some of the questions that we're going to run you through, that's good. Keep typing it in there. I think that's really important. But we're going to consider the situations as we go. We're going to ask you to reflect back on this particular opportunity. And as we are talking about the discipline required to increase win rates and profitability, think about where you did a really good job of that, but you still lost the sale. Where did you not do a good job of that, which might be an indication, right, that of why you might have lost the sale. But hopefully, this will provide some insight for you as you look at it, both looking back at the opportunity that you lost as well as going forward. So let's do one quick poll, and I'm actually going to try and quantify what it is that I just asked you. So on the opportunity you just identified, when do you think you first realized that this was a loss? Was it I didn't have a clue until we heard back from the customer? I'm going to keep going here. Yeah, and I'll get them all open there. So B is when you found out who the competition was. C was when you submitted a proposal. There was a highly competitive RFP, for example. From day one, we just had a bad vibe about this one. Go ahead and put your answers in. We'll give you a little bit of time. People are jumping in right now. Looks like a relatively dead heat there. Close. I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds as we look at it. Sorry to bring up the painful. Um, hopefully, it was something you learned from and not all pain. But let's go ahead and close the poll. Let's see what we got. So it looks like 56% of it said when you submitted the proposal. So when you put the proposal in, now again, let's recognize what this means is you've gone through sort of building a relationship with the customer to understand what their issues are. You've gone through then bringing your organization together to construct a solution, and then writing a proposal. So you spent a lot of time in sort of when you get to C at this particular point. In D, again, you can see that people had a bad feeling right at the beginning. There's a small group, only 11%, that didn't have a clue until they heard back from the customer that they lost. But interesting information here, Michael, to sort of set up the conversation.
It really is. In fact, the like the 33% said just bad vibes around this, and that's I don't know how many times I've heard that from salespeople.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell. You can tell. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been on several that's like, yeah, this is not. I don't. Why am I keep going?
Yeah. So, that one of the things about the bad vibes, this gut feeling. Like I said, I don't know how many salespeople I've talked to. Just I had a gut feeling that it was not going to work. And when you think about it, the gut feeling really comes from 3 unanswered questions you have. You come into this situation. First one we call probability, and it's really the question of, well, the second one is value, and the third one is position. And taking probability to begin with, the question really comes in as, will this customer buy? You just get this funny feeling that, they're not, they don't have a budget for it, or they're not the decision maker, or there's nothing really driving them to make a decision. When you see the increase in no decisions up to 36%, you can understand how, will they buy something is a critical issue. A third of your opportunities could go away just with that one question. But value has to do with, does the business have value for me and my company? And this kind of fits into the wins we never got. I've heard a lot of people talk about the customer from heck, although they don't use that. Most salespeople don't use that word. That you might maybe win, or you put a lot of investment in and you never get anywhere with them. And the last one is position, which is really around the question of, will the customer buy from me? Meaning, do I have the best thing? Do I have the thing that's delivering the greatest value to that customer? And this often makes up that gut feeling. The problem is that it's hard to go to your manager or go to the organization or just walk away from a business from a gut feeling. It's like, well, I don't know. Which is why we focus a lot on the need for evidence. You need to explore these opportunities and gather evidence so you can say to your manager, hey, I've gone through it. This person doesn't have a budget. They don't have the authority. There's nothing really driving them to make the decision. It's not strategic. Let's walk away from it. And that's really the core around evidence. It's really about the verified information. You really know, have some data that says, listen, we're not positioned well with them. There's a competitor that's positioned much better, or they're not going to buy anything, or that even if we did win the business, it's not going to be profitable for our organization. It really builds a rationale for pursuing as well. The evidence is not just about turning away an opportunity, but it's about building a better opportunity as well. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means, how do we build a better opportunity? We'll talk about that a little bit. It really transfers everything from a subjective nature, I just have a bad feeling about this, to something that's objective. This is why I don't think we should pursue it. And it really communicates internally to get other resources aligned around this opportunity. It really helps create the dialogue that needs to occur within the organization to make these kind of important decisions about investing resources into an opportunity versus walking away from a potential business.
Good. Thanks, Michael. I think, let me see, I'm going this way. All right,
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit more detail about this. And here's where we're going to get into some of the specific questions. The specific, as Michael just talked about, the discipline around gathering the evidence. And so let's stay with probability. And that's really, again, if you remember, that's will the customer buy anything, right? And it's really important to start there. By the way, most people want to start with, will the customer buy from me? That's where most salespeople want to start, right? But the critical thing for sales managers really to drive is to start in this order. Will the customer buy something at all? And there's a couple things that you want to look at. Actually, four things I'm going to talk about right here. The first one is this opportunity of strategic importance to the organization? Right? So that's a question you need to ask. Now, this is not a sales manager asking the salesperson, is this important? And the salesperson sort of winging the answer. It's sort of like, yes, it is strategically important. The follow-up question is why? Who said what? Who told you something about it? And what you're looking for is somewhat of importance tell you that is critical. Does someone connected to a critical success factor or an objective in the organization? Did you see it as a salesperson in your research from the annual report or for some press release or something like that? So that's the first thing. It has strategic importance. And a little note here, just because they put an RFP out does not mean it's strategically important. Next, you want to look at that the needs are clearly defined. Oftentimes, when you're going out to market, especially as I said before, the buying process is changing. What we found is that a lot of people would put out an RFP, gather the information, decide what better questions they need to ask and how they better construct the RFP, and then resubmit an RFP, right? So if you see, for example, that the needs are not really clearly defined, that's a clue that probably there's something you need to follow up on. And when you mean by that is there's clear objectives, there's clear outcomes. In fact, maybe there's even a clear budget. Not maybe actually, is there a clear budget? That's what you want to know. Is the key stakeholder of someone critical inside the organization? Um, Continuing on, that they have a clear decision process. The person you're talking to, or in an RFP, if that's what you're getting to, understands how the decision will be made. They're clear about it. They understand the hierarchy. They understand. And by the way, I always get worried if when I ask the question, who's the decision maker, the person said is me. Who else? It's me. That's typically not the way anything gets done anymore, unless it's a really small kind of a thing. It doesn't happen anymore. And so again, that's a critical thing you need to look at. But also, does this customer have some experience making this kind of decision? I often see a lot of times a brand new person coming into the organization puts out an RFP to sort of make a name for themselves, but they've never had experience in that organization and maybe never even had experience in any other organizations making these kinds of decisions. It's critical to pay attention to that. They've done this before, they don't, so they understand sort of the complexities of that. That's really when you're searching, trying to find answers. As a sales manager, you're coaching your salesperson. You want to make sure that you're asking these questions, strategic, define clearly. You have a decision process, and this is again the dialogue with the salesperson to say, "Tell me how you know. Do you think that's strong enough? Who else do you think we need to go ask?" Right. So that's what you need to do. The second step here that Michael laid out before in the second question is a value. Does the business have value for me and for my company? And what you want to look at is two things about this. One is value, and the other one is cost. So value is pretty simple and straightforward. It's initial and recurring revenue. All right. And be really clear, recurring revenue is not the hope of revenue. It's actually defined in clear revenue, right? So if this is a pilot, and we'll talk about the rest of it later, again, that's a worrisome kind of a piece because you need to then only analyze the information in terms of value for you on what you know you're going to get, not what you hope you're going to get. And there's also this intangible value. There's a lot of things that can go into the intangible value piece of it. It could be that you as an organization want this logo, right? You want this logo as part of who it is that you serve because you have bigger needs or bigger opportunities to use that to leverage in the marketplace. There's also a lot of other sort of intangible value kinds of things you can look at. Logo is the easiest one for me to describe. On the cost side, and this has to go against the value, right? Because at the end of the day, you got to be positive and significantly positive for you to pursue. You need to consider the support time, your time as a salesperson, your time as a sales manager. Are there any executives involved? How complex is the solution? Do you have to build something? And are you getting paid to build something that you don't necessarily have? And how easy or hard is it to work with the customer? You got to consider that. Now, again, that's a sort of a uncomfortable way to think about it. But if the customer is easy to work with, or if the customer is hard to work with, you got to account for that in terms of time that it's going to take you for that. And again, on the value thing, you're going to look at value, cost. Is there a positive that will say yes? Let's move forward on that one. And the last one you need to look at is positioning. Will the customer buy from me? Are you clear as you're going through the process that your offering matches the customer's needs? Not, and again, when you're talking about that, it's not that you have a whole bunch of other features that the customer doesn't need, right? Or hasn't expressed a need for. So, in terms of what the customer's expressed a need for, do you have solutions that fit that the best, right? Of anybody. It doesn't matter what extra stuff you have because it doesn't matter to the customer. The second question that you want to look at is um, that not only have you been able to make a connection for yourself that your offering matches the customer needs, the customer sees that. And not only do they see that, they see that there's a value to that, maybe a value beyond what your competitor can do. Because we hope that in answering the question, will the customer buy from me, that you see a path for a competitive advantage, right? And remember, I want to stress this again, the competitive advantage is not features that the customer has not asked for. That's not necessarily a competitive advantage unless you can bring that into something that the customer wants and decides then that he needs. And then the final thing is that you have credibility with the decision makers. Do you have a positive reputation with the decision makers? Meaning, you know who they are. We're going all the way back to the probability part of it. So just in looking at this really quickly, probability, will the customer buy? There's some details that you need to find, and it's really important to look at it. Does the business have value for me and my company? Again, value versus cost. Make sure you're paying attention to the cost side of it. Most salespeople don't. That's what sales managers really need to bring up in the conversation. And then finally, when you're looking at will the customer buy from me, there's really some honest questions you need to look at yourself to say, I made a connection to our solution to what it is that they need and value, and I have credibility with the people that are making the decision. Very good. We'll
So
dissect this a little bit more.
yeah, let's talk about this a little bit more. And I want you to go back to the opportunity you identified, the loss you experienced earlier, and we're going to do a quick poll. When you look at that opportunity, what was the earliest warning sign you had? Was it that the customer, wasn't going to really buy anything anyway? Did you know that early on, or was it around value? Did it not have the business value for you? Or was it around the question of will your customer buy from me? Was it the positioning that somebody else was positioned better? So when you look at this in that particular opportunity, what was your first indication that you weren't going to win this business? So why don't you go ahead and put it into the quick poll? Give you a few seconds here. Okay, give you about 5 more seconds. Okay, why don't we go ahead and close the poll and take a look at the results. So it's kind of evenly split between, will the customer buy from me and will the customer buy anything at all from anybody? So a lot of it does focus on, what's going on inside the customer. I think there's also, and it's probably true because it's a loss. Whereas that doesn't have the business value for you is often not a reason you walk away. It might be a reason you try to change your positioning, but it's not necessarily a reason to walk away. So a lot of people were able to identify fairly early that the customer wasn't going to buy anything um, you within that.
Hey,
Now,
Michael. Hey, Michael.
yes,
Let's do a question. I have a question, but I want to ask
sure,
you that I typically get at this time.
sure.
Again, part of the reason I'm breaking in here too is to encourage the audience. If you have questions that come up, comments, reactions, I appreciate what you've already put in here. I see this one that John Lamb said, we came this far, we might as well keep going.
Mm.
Yeah, but that does still take time. But I understand the nature of that comment. But Michael, I just went through a slide that had a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And as you're looking at that, as the audience might be looking at that, part of the thing is, do we really need to do all this? Is it critical that we do this? Um, isn't that just I'm not a waste of time, but isn't it overkill?
It is a good question, and my perspective, what I've experienced with successful salespeople, is that it's not a one and done kind of thing. You don't,
What do you mean a one
after
and done? You mean not like one call?
one call, you don't go
Okay,
in and make a decision about these three things and then make a no go decision. It
right.
really relates to the kind of investment you're making into you and your organization's time and effort for this opportunity, and you continually update that. So in the first call, you might find out that um, there's not a budget, but it is kind of strategic, so it's worth continuing to pursue. As you go on, you realize that maybe this, given where this customer's buying point is a little low for us in terms of our margin, and we're not going to get the margin we typically get. Or you go on, or find that there's a competitor involved, and so it's a continuous go no go decision. And it's most critical just before a big investment in time and effort. If you're meeting with the customer one-on-one, you have a couple virtual calls with them, maybe a face-to-face meeting, and you're getting to a point where you've got to get other people involved to provide technical updates, or to do product demos, or to write proposals, or you need to bring in your manager. That's when it starts getting critical. Then you start thinking about, okay, is it worth the investment for our organization, given what I know up to this point? I
And
think the other,
Michael, one quick thing, you keep saying the investment for the organization, and that's, I think,
yeah,
a critical point to call out. I'm sure people are picking up on that, but the point about this is salespeople often believe that it's like, this is my account. And again, I'm saying my account, but this is the account I'm choosing to pursue. I've got good evidence, and I'm going to keep going, and so I can make the decision about where I spend my time, and I keep going. But the reality is that the further you go down in, the more you're committing your organization,
patient, yeah,
not just the salesperson and their specific time. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to
okay.
emphasize what you just said there.
Well, that's a great point, and it's also kind of gets to John Lamb's comment in the chat, is that you've invested a whole bunch of time, what we often people refer to as sunk costs. You've already got a lot of sunk costs, time, your manager's time, other people's time invested. Might as well, even though
Let's just keep
we
going.
know, yeah.
Yeah,
And I had a manager who was Japanese, and he always liked to talk about, when you bring up sunk costs and an opportunity, he goes, "That's dust. You know, it's
yeah,
gone, it's dust, you're never going to get it back. So don't think about sunk costs in making your decision.
yeah,
Sunk
yeah.
costs is not a good reason to continue to sink more costs into it."
Yep.
But I think the other thing that's critical is that doing this kind of analysis is not just about making a go no go decision. That these factors can also be used to help you improve your positioning within that account. For example, let's take probability. If there are ways of building in clarifications, creating a compelling event, or working with your major contact to find who the true decision makers are, or the other decision makers are within this, that could go a long way to improving your position, not just being a decision about go no go. Or around value, you think about, if you're worried about this not hitting margins, is there a way to link this to other opportunities, or raise the price? Are there things you can offer that are low cost to you but high value to the customer, that allows you to bring your margins back in line with what's required of your company, or bring the profitability of that business back in line? Or when it comes to positioning, are there you find somebody else's positioned closer in terms of value? And I think David said it really well earlier, is that just because something has value to you and your company doesn't mean it has value to that customer. So you might have the best service in the world, but hey, this customer doesn't care, it doesn't need your service. They have the internal technology and expertise to take care of it. So can you modify your positions? Can you drop things that are valuable to you but not as valuable to the customer, and thus reduce the price? Are there things you can add? Are there third parties you can bring in to provide some capabilities that you don't have? And really use this analysis not just as a let's make a decision to drop it, and make it a opportunity to improve your position, provide you with better competitive advantage in terms of moving forward.
Which is exactly why, by the way, the discipline that we talked about before, having the answer to all those questions, will help with having the dialogue with your sales manager about how you might be able to reposition and still go forward, how you can still create value with it, how you can still ultimately win. It's that dialogue. But again, remember what we just said is that your decision to pursue involves the organization, and the more data that you have around why this is a good opportunity to pursue and why the best information that you have points to this is something to pursue for the organization, the better support and help you get. I can't tell you how many times I have salespeople tell me, from client organizations, they go, it's harder for me to sell this internally than it is to sell it to the customer. And part of that is because the salesperson may not have provided enough information about why we're pursuing this opportunity, right? So it's really critical. Here now is an opportunity to talk about an example. And I'm going to talk about this example from my perspective of a situation that I had. It was a couple years ago, and we got an RFP in. The RFP was for a global organization, but it was specifically for the Asia Pacific region of this organization. And when I got the RFP, I was trying to figure out which salesperson would I assign it to, but there were some things that were causing me a little bit of concern. As I looked at the RFP, it didn't seem like there was a clear objective they were going to. There wasn't a clear why around why they were doing what they were doing. People come to us and say, we want to have greater sales effectiveness. Why? Well, the answer should be obvious, so I don't need to tell you. Well, no, there has to be something. So there was something nagging at me. What I did was then I called up the sponsor of the RFP, and I got on the phone with her and her colleague. Um, I did my normal conversations, many things that you would see from that slide in the back that had the detail of questions I was asking them about the project funding and all that kind of stuff. But um, I asked them who the sponsor was, and they essentially gave their head of L&D was the sponsor, which again, that learning and development, training and development. So that surprised me. Finally, after about 20 minutes, I said to them, "Can you tell me what will happen if you decide to do nothing as a result of this RFP? You decide to do nothing. What's going to happen?" And the answer was nothing. And I'm not saying they didn't answer. They said the word nothing. And I said, What do you mean nothing?" He said, "Well, yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen if they do the training or they don't." And so I said to them, I said, "Forgive me for what I'm going to say, but you are talking about an RFP where you want an organization to come in and teach you about sales effectiveness. What we're going to coach them to do, we're going to teach them to do is ask questions much like I did over the last 20 minutes as a way to qualify, understand the need, get discovery to make sure we could, potentially even, offer some solutions to see how those might fit. We're going to teach them how to do that. But I do have to tell you, if what I'm going to tell people that are in the training, that if they give the answers you do, I'm going to tell them it's a no go. So I'm trying to tell you this is a no go for me." And they said, "No, please, will you do this? We really need to do it," which again told me that they need to check the box basically. So what ended up happening is I didn't give it to any salesperson. I did the proposal. Um, I did put a lot of effort into it, but I got to tell you, to be honest with you, I didn't put my maximum effort into it because it was a pretty quick turnaround. I did the presentation. I couldn't hear from him that day. I didn't talk to him for a week. They ghosted me for a week, which is a terrible feeling. I finally got on the phone with them, and what do you suspect that they said? They said, "We decided we weren't going to go forward." And I just said, "Thank you very much for the opportunity," and that was it. I didn't even I didn't even want to do "I told you so." But again, in the context of that, those kind of things is partly about having the courage to say, yeah, I know this is a big company. I'd love to have this logo. And this is a great opportunity for us. And at the same time, they weren't going to buy anything. And it became clear in that whole thing.
And I think David's story is really shows the critical role of a sales manager in these kinds of decisions. Because, right, a salesperson is going to want to pursue any business. It's the manager who wants to pursue the right business for their organization. And there's a lot of roles for the manager, and it's really gets down to asking the right questions. Conducting opportunity reviews with your salespeople, making sure that you're up to speed on what they're doing. Demand evidence, making sure okay, why is this going to have value for our organization? What's the sales price? What's going to cost us to support this? How do you know we're the best one positioned for it? And focus on the early go, no go decision, helping them work through it. And it really comes down to salespeople asking the right questions and having the right kind of dialogue with their salespeople. For example, let's talk about in the first tape, probability they're going to buy something. And let's focus in on, is it a strategic position? What does a sales manager ask to determine how strategic it is and how well positioned you are? And it could be things like questions, right? Like, what is the strategic goal this is tied to? Um, are you connected to the executive this goal is most important to, this strategic goal is most important to you? Can you get from your primary contact now to that executive? Really kind of ask those questions to say, is this going to be something that your current route will get you to? And it's not, again, that could be let's not pursue this anymore, or it could be, how do we position ourselves differently within the organization? And the more a manager can ask the right kinds of questions, the more they can create the kind of dialogue that comes to either effective repositioning of yourself or effective decisions around whether or not to pursue a business or not.
If you look at the value side of things and the cost side of things, again, this is some support and help for sales managers and what they might do. If we focus only on the cost side of it, what's some questions you might ask? Who need to help? You might ask the salesperson, who will need to help configure the solution and create the proposal? Do we know who it is? Do we have a standard process for it? Do we need to have other people that aren't typically involved in writing a proposal? What additional investments do we need to make in terms of demonstrations, potentially, any prototypes, anything that we might need in the pre-sale? Because remember, this is both about pre-sale and post-sale when you're looking at the cost of these things. Who'll be on the team? How much time do you think they'll take? Do we need executives involved? Have we thought of everyone that might be involved? Again, a lot of times bigger opportunities really begin to snowball in terms of the number of people that might need to be involved, especially if they're big ticket items, which often sort of draw your attention, the big value side in terms of the initial and recurring revenue. And this costs are really, really where the sales manager can help so much by asking those questions and really helping get the answer as well.
And in terms of positioning, when you focus in on, does the customer perceive your product as having the best match to their needs? What kind of questions can a manager ask? They can really kind of focus in on, well, what is the key advantage that the customer sees for you? What have they said that says, your offering is better than the competitor's offering? Or it might be something around the idea that asking about different stakeholders, who are the big influencers, the primary influences on this. How do they perceive our offering? Are they on board? Do they see advantage, or do they see a competitor as having a better advantage? And by asking these questions, the sales manager can create this dialogue and not necessarily make a decision as a go or no go, but help the salesperson come to the same decision on their own and build their capabilities to make these decisions early, or help them figure out a way to reframe their offering or reposition their offering. And we really think that it's critical, particularly in terms of these go, no-go decisions, to engage the managers and provide them with the right kinds of coaching skills to ask these questions, to dig deeper into it. And in
Hey,
fact, we
Michael,
have,
before you
yeah,
before you jump there, go back one, just because I want
sure.
to again reinforce something that you were saying. Over the last three slides, we've essentially given you for one of the questions in each one of the three sections, you know, questions you as sales managers can ask. And again, I think the important part here is this is about a dialogue and the sales manager really being a partner with the salesperson. And it doesn't always have to be the sales manager, it could be someone else inside the organization that's asking some of these questions. And the way I used to do it too, to your point, Michael, that you said before, is that it's not a one and done, right? So the salesperson comes back and said, I just had a discovery call with a client. I think this is going to be a good opportunity. Let me tell you about it, sales manager. Let me tell you about it. And then you can begin to ask the questions. Do you think the customer is going to buy? What have you found? And it's really those follow-up questions that allow the salesperson and the sales manager to decide together, yes, we need to go back and find out some more information. A couple things about this. One is recognize that your level of access in the organization is directly correlated to the types of questions you ask, right? So if you ask the standard questions that all your competitors ask, you're going to get access to the standard level that all your competitors get access to. However, if you're asking questions around, will the customer buy anything? You're asking questions around value. You're asking questions around sort of the strategic match ultimately of your solution. Those are questions that really challenge the customer to think, and I don't mean in a bad way challenge the customer to think, but to recognize you have value. And all the way back to the beginning statement that we said in terms of the number of calls that you have access to is getting shorter. You got to add value as a salesperson every call. The questions you ask are one of the ways you demonstrate value and allow you to get access. And that's absolutely critical. There's also one question in here that we don't have, but in my example that I told you earlier, I mentioned was a question I asked, and I think it's a really powerful question, which is if you do nothing, what will happen? That's a really powerful question. And as I said before in the example I offered for the APAC organization, they actually literally said nothing. Another time I asked this question, um, and the answer was, we'll go out of business. And I said, well, wait a minute. You could talk to me a little bit more
Mhm.
about that. And my contact was able to say, if our salesperson don't increase, we're a startup. It was a digital part of a landline phone company. It was a digital part of it, and so they were struggling to position themselves in the marketplace. And literally, if they weren't going to make their quota for over the course of the next year, they were literally going to go out of business. And that was a powerful thing that I could then use in doing my proposal and win the deal. Was the answer to that question. So again, I wanted to, as we're asking questions the sales manager could do. That's a great question to ask your salesperson. If they don't do anything, what's going to happen? Great question. Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought I'd
No,
point that
no
out.
problem. That's really good. That's very good. And and we do put emphasis on the sales manager's role because it is. We believe our experience suggests that the sales manager's involvement is critical, not just to this area, but to all areas of sales. Their ability to ask the right questions and coach their salespeople is critical. In fact, we have data that says that. This was actually a series of studies we did over several years that we looked at salesperson involvement in coaching salespeople. And the metric was performance improvement, the amount of revenue their sales teams were generating. And some organizations we work with didn't want to do any coaching, and they kind of became the baseline for it. Some of them did some minimal coaching efforts, meaning basically they said go out and encourage their managers to coach. Um, and they got a little bump in their effort. At least the manager showed an interest in it. Some of them provided what we call moderate coaching skills. These were just kind of generic coaching skills. Here's how you ask questions. This is how you listen. And they got about an 18% improvement in performance. I mean, so this is an 18% jump in revenue generated. But when you provide the highest level of coaching skills, which means you're not only teaching them how to coach, but you're teaching them how to coach to these specific kinds of questions around position, value, and probability, you get close to a 50% jump in revenue. And so when organizations ask us about, well, should we really involve the manager in this initiative? And saying, well, it depends. Is 50% increase in revenue worth the effort you're putting into getting the managers involved? And in almost every case, they say yes. So we think it's very critical to involve managers. And that's why we spend a significant amount of time looking at the manager's role in supporting these kinds of decisions and actions and coaching their salespeople effectively on it.
Very good. And I do have a couple questions, but if anybody has any questions as we continue here, please put those in chat. Let's do a quick sort of where are we right now? What do you need to do? The first thing is we all need to recognize that the customer buying process has changed. I don't think this is new news to you, but the reality is that that means our sales approach needs to change as well. Again, I don't think that's new news to you as well. So that's sort of we all see this, that we've got to change the way that we approach the sale. It's really important to pursue the right business. And here's why we've talked a lot about why it's important. And the three questions: what will the customer buy something? Does the business have value for me and my company? And will the customer buy from me and my company? But the reality is that knowing this information that a customer is not going to buy, knowing it early rather than pursuing it all the way to the submit a proposal and getting out. If you get out early, that's not only going to increase your win rates, right? Because you don't have to count that as a win or loss if you get out early. And it's going to also increase your profitability, because when you look at the organization, if you're spending a lot of time on non-winning deals, your profitability of your organization is going to go down. So it's critical to increase both of those. And we can't stress this enough: involve the sales manager and the organization in the process. Gather evidence, invite dialogue with the sales manager, invite dialogue with the organization versus inspection. You don't have enough information, go back and get more. This should be a thing that is a team activity, something that you go to and do together. As we look at this, we know this. People love to buy, they hate to be sold. We also know that salespeople love to win and they hate to lose. But the reality is, your role as sales manager is about wanting salespeople to win the right business. You have a critical role in that, and you certainly can do that. Michael, before I finish this, I do have one other quick question for you, and I do have an answer to some of it, but I want you to look at it too. And this goes back to the discipline. And again, it's back to that question: do I really need to collect all this information if it's a customer I've worked with for a long time?
You know, I would, if this was 10 years ago, I would have said, it wouldn't be that critical. But I think today what we've seen a lot of is that just because a company's done business with you in the past doesn't mean they're going to do business with you in the future. Everybody's much more value focused. And so, it's almost because it's largely become, having done past business with a customer gives you the right to propose the next time. That's it. Nothing more. And so, yes, I think having this kind of analysis is still important, even if you've worked with that customer for a long period of time. Similar perspective, David? Or
Yeah, I wouldn't. And actually, I have, as seems to be the case for this particular webinar, I have a story. I was working with one of our salespeople and going through the questions that we set up. This ultimately comes into 20 questions gathered in those three particular areas. And I was going through the details. And the salesperson said, "But I've been working with this client for 10 years." And after we went through the whole process, I said, I got to tell you, based on the information you have right now, this would be a no-go. It doesn't look like the customer's going to buy anything. Even though they continue to buy, this isn't going to buy anything. And you're taking the last deal to then discount from there to discount from there. I'm not sure this is of value to you if you win it in the first place. And quite frankly, I don't think you're going to win either. And the look on his face was, "Oh my God, you're right." And the thing that your competitor hopes, by the way, in those kind of situations, is that you basically they hope that you become complacent. That's what the competitor hopes. If you're in a long-standing relationship with a customer, that's what gives the competitor opportunity. Is the salesperson that's the incumbent becomes complacent. These questions don't allow you to become complacent. That's really the key. So let's, we certainly other questions that you have, but we do want to take a moment with the little bit of time that we have left to have you take write down what was your most important takeaway from this webinar. Is there anything you can use right away, or what important thing that you heard? What could you use? Please type that in the chat. Phil, I
And
think you might
thanks.
need help. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, David. There's a new pod over just below the video pod where you see David and Michael. Just go ahead and please put in your most useful idea or takeaway. And David and Michael are still on standby here for your questions or comments here about today's session. Thank you. I see people answering their most useful idea or takeaways. And also, the link is there to download Wilson Learning's article that they nicely provided, increase win rates and profitability.
Very good. We're still, if there's any other questions that you have, but let me take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, the questions from my part, the stories from Michael's part, the research and the data. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you, because it was enjoyable for us. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Gary Van Antwerp.
Yeah.
Thank you, SMM Connect, for everything. Michael, I'll pass it to you, but I want to thank everybody at this particular point. Michael.
Great. Just want to thank everybody here for coming. We really appreciate your involvement and great comments in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you.
Great.
Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, David and Michael. Thank you so much for another great session here. All you have to do is put in Wilson Learning and SMM Connect, and you'll find a whole library of great recordings that David and Michael have done. As David said, we're guessing, what was it, 8 years
I
or
think
so?
I'm afraid it might be 10, but I think
Oh
it's
my
9.
God. Yeah, wow. The time flies when you're having fun here. And your expertise has been so appreciated throughout the years in this ever-changing environment that we live in here, especially sales environment. So
Oh, yeah.
your insights are always welcome. Don't forget to reach out to Wilson Learning at wilsonlearning.com and do keep abreast of everything that's changing here in approaches, in global approaches. David, thanks for those examples here today too on what can and can't happen in the process. And Michael also, thanks.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. And we'll just be live here just for another moment or so. If you want to go ahead and put in your takeaway, most valuable takeaway. And once again, I want to thank all of the members here at SMM Connect for attending today's event. Do check the webinar calendar frequently. Gentlemen, I'm not sure if we have your next session booked already. We may.
Nope.
But
I think
okay.
this is our last one for the year.
All right.
Our next time is probably going to be late January.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we look forward to that January session, and to our members, again, keep checking the webinar calendar, because there'll be more from Wilson Learning coming up in 2024. Thank you all for attending, again, today's event, and we look forward to seeing you back here at SMM Connect.
Thanks so much.